Hi, and welcome back. Today we're going to work with enlargements again, but this time we're going to do fractional scale factors and the center again being the origin. Once again, our origin is the point 0, 0. It's just the middle of our axes. So we start off our next part by drawing in our lines that connect our center and our each vertex. So do one at a time, be as accurate as possible, because these will help us check to make sure we're doing it right, keeping in mind that you do not actually have to do this every time, but I always like doing it every once in a while to make sure I'm still doing the correct method and nothing has actually changed. So same method works for every single type of these enlargements. Kind of a one model fits all. So we have done our lines. That is the end of step one. So now we're counting the number of squares vertically and horizontally between the center and each vertex or corner, and then we want to label these lines. So I always just choose to pick our closest point, and you don't have to do each one, as I've said before. So I'm going to pick here to here, so we're 1 over and 2 up, right? So let's just work with this one for now. So what is our scale factor now? We always multiply those measurements by our scale factor. So our scale factor is a half. So that means we're doing 1 times a half, which is simply a half. And then we're going to do 2 times 1/2, which is simply 1. So that means that this point, I'm going to do my points in red, is going to be a half over from our center and 1 up. So that means right there, which lies on our line. Now, I'm going to start using more of our shortcuts. So our original shape, well, how big was it? Well, it is too high or too wide and 4 across. So here, now instead, I'm going to do 4 times by 1/2, which is 2, and 2 times a half we've already done, and we know that is simply 1. So from that red point there, we can just draw our box, our rectangle, sorry. We're going to draw it, well, instead of being 4 over, we've said it's going to be 2 over, and I'm just going to redo that. I want to land on it. So from this point, 1 is there, 2 is to there, right? Because we're at 0.5, we'll plus 2 is 2.5 in the negative direction. And it lines on our dotted line that we drew originally. Now, we said we're going to go 1 up now. Once again, lies on our lines that we've drawn. Then going over to complete our rectangle, that also lines on our dotted line, and back to the red dot. So we know we've actually done this correctly with those lines as our check. So, second example we're going to do, our scale factor this time is 3/2. 3/2. So we're using our origin as a center. Even though I know it's going to be there, it can help just when it starts to get a little bit crowded our page. So let's make our lines, right? So seems to be having a little bit of trouble today drawing these lines. I apologize. So we've got our 1. We've got another 1. And you're gonna have to do a little bit of readjusting with some of these, I think. So this is why I always say when you're doing your work, draw in pencil. That way, if you make mistakes, you can move them. Luckily, I can move it with technology. You have the power of an eraser or rubber. So there we go. Pretty close right there. It'll give us the information we need at the end to check. So now let's actually pick a point. I hope I sound like a broken record by the end. I always pick my closest point. It's the easiest to work with. And draw your horizontal and vertical line. So this is 2. Actually, I'm going to write that over here. 2, and it is 1. So that means when we actually do our calculation, do it over here, 2 times 3 divided by 2 is equal to simply 3, right? Because the 2's will simply cancel each other out. Now, if we're going to do 1 times by 3 over 2, well, if we have 3 halves, that's simply 3 halves, right? So nice and easy calculations. So I'm going to do my first point in a different color to make it easy. So we'll do green because we haven't used it. So instead, from our center, instead of our point moving kind of over just 1, that is going to turn into 3.5. So that's 3 half spaces, right? So that's those little spaces. So 1, 2, 3 halves. And then we're going 3 full spaces up. So 1, 2, 3, and we have that point right there. So this point I'm going to make it easy, and we know if we put some measurements on our diagram, we can just enlarge normally. So here's 2, this is 1, that'll give us enough information. So over here now, let's do 2 times 3 over 2, which we've done, and that gives us 3, and then we've already done our 1 times 3 over 2. So look at that. If you do this method, most of the time we end up repeating our calculations depending on the shape. So that means over from our green shape, we are going over 3. So we're going 1, 2, 3, which lies directly on that dotted line. And then we're going down 3 half spaces. So those are the little gray ones. So 1, 2, 3. Once again, that lands on our line. And to finish this up, let's connect our dots as such. Okay, so now that we're done that, on this page here, you have your 2 practice questions. So pause the video now, and when you're ready, press play, and we'll go through the answers. So welcome back. We're going to go through the answers now, and we know that we are going about the origin for our scale factor. So I'm going to go through and mark that right now for both of our instances. Now, instead of drawing my lines at the start, I'm going to do them after, so they're actually a proper check. So let's right now pick our closest point, as I always do. In our second problem here, it's a little bit different because our shape is actually included in the origin. And I wanted to kind of introduce you through a practice problem of what will happen what happens when our shape is right there. So I'm just going to pick that point. So here we have in our first instance, we know that we're going over 2 and up 2. Because if we start at 0, 0 and we go to 2, 2, that's just 2 and 2. So this is by a half. So we go 2 times by 1/2, which is simply 1. So we know from our center we're going over 1, up 1, and we can make our new point. Now let's pick this. That's 3. That is 2. So we're going 3 times 1/2, which is 3 halves. So we're going over 3 half spaces. And then instead of 2 up, we're going 1 up. So we can make our next point. So 3 half spaces. Now, if we look, that's something quite not right there. So we're going to come back there in a second, and we'll just look over at the triangle to the right while I kind of think about that. I know I've made a mistake there. I just cannot see it right now, so I apologize. But this is why we do a check after. So we'll come back to that in a second. If you look at the right triangle here, though, we can see that this point is 1 and 1 away, and we're taking it as 3 over 2. So instead of being 1 away, that's going to become negative 3 over 2 and negative 3 over 2. So we have that point. Now we can look at, say, let's do it with just another point. And we know that we're 1 over and 2 up. So we're 2 up and 2 and 1. So 2 times 3 over 2 is simply 3. And 1 times 3 over 2 is simply 3 over 2. So from our center, we're going to go, if it's 1 over, we're going to now go 3 halves over. So we're here. And now we have to go 3 up. So 1, 2, 3. We'll make our other point there. So lastly, same thing with our bottom right point. We're going down 1 and over 1. So we're going down 3 halves and over 3 halves. And we're going to line up right there. And we can connect our dots to see our enlarged shape. So if you notice, it kind of just got bigger around that point, which makes it almost appear like it's getting bigger. If you've ever seen one of those mirrors where you face mirrors back and forth to each other, one image will keep getting smaller as you go into the mirrors. So we're going to look back at our first one now and try and spot the mistake that was made. So the best way to sometimes do this is I'm going to go back a step. So we have our point there. We times by a half. We had our new point at, well, 2 times 1/2 is just 1. 2 times 1/2 is 1, so it's over 1, up 1. So our red point is indeed correct. So let's pick, now, I'm going to do a different color. We're going to pick this point simply up here. So we are 4 up, right? 4 up and 2 across. So that's going to become just 2 and 1. So we're going to go up 2 over 1. That'll be our next point. And so we can start to draw our lines. So if we notice that we just halved our points, and we're just going to, from here, we're going to go over 3 halves to there, down, and we can finish off our shape. So I think what I was probably doing with that in the first instance was I was going from the wrong point and not my center. So your shape should have looked like that.